So hi, I'm Marcus. I've been in the app marketing industry for a little over 11 years now. I currently work as an independent app growth consultant. Started my career back in 2012 in gaming, working for InnoGames in Germany. Forge of Empires is their biggest title, and made the switch to subscription apps in 2019. And now I've been full-time consulting for around about the past year, focusing mainly on meta ads and making scan work for iOS app devs. So throughout my career, I've really been focused on paid social, mainly working with meta ads, but also Snapchat, TikTok, and all the other social networks. So what I mean by creative strategy, or what most people mean by creative strategy when they talk about it, is a framework, a process that takes a seemingly messy task of like creative ideation, coming up with new ideas, and streamlines it so that you can over time get better at it and create predictable results. Because as you scale your marketing budgets, you don't want to be dependent on someone having a great idea that works. You want a process that spits these ideas out over and over again and that you can improve over time. And that's what people might mean by creative strategy. So yeah, I think the main parts to it are your user/audience research, really figuring out like how to talk to the people that most matter to your product. Then the design and really ideation process. A creative strategist, I would say, is someone, I mean, first of all, every company probably has someone, even though they might not have a profile called that way. Someone is taking care of it if you're running ads that aren't just search ads. So someone in your team is probably doing what a creative strategy does. And I think it should usually be a person that has a mixed skill set of like UA, being analytical, knowing how these platforms work and which metrics to look at, and a also strong like eye for design, or being very just an affinity for design in the end, so that they can mix those two worlds. I think what's also a big plus for someone in this role is if they're a creator themselves, so that they know how maybe one or multiple of these platforms really function on like an organic level, so that they have created video content maybe themselves, or actively writing on these platforms, because it's just really good to know like how actually the social functionality behind it works, so that you're not just creating your ads in like an isolated manner out of your company, but you're really close to the audience on these platforms. The skill set, I think, like it's really good like if you have like basic knowledge of copywriting, of editing and design, so that you're actually able to create MVPs, or at least like wireframes for a team that then does the creative execution. You will have to kind of create a process and manage it. So process management, definitely important to make this better over time. And then, as I said, it needs to be this mix of analytical, but also creative. There are first signs that it's coming a bit more popular. Generally, I don't see that many app companies yet that hire for a profile like that, or like, at least I haven't seen any like job offerings. Where I see this often is, for example, in agencies and also in the D2C e-com space, where people are just a lot more focused on these kind of roles. Which I think is interesting. I actually learned a lot from the D2C space in how I operate creatives. I think they're really advanced when it comes to how they work with creators. So yeah, influencers, creators, how they create UGC content. So a lot to learn there. And I think like there's first signs that also app companies are onboarding these kind of people. I know on LinkedIn, for example, the two Calm guys, Manson Chan, Nick Handler, they're both not with Calm anymore, but they are pretty vocal about creative strategy, also how to incorporate AI in your creative strategy. And I think they both call themselves actually creative strategists. So it is just such an important topic for these discovery channels. So that's why more and more people are putting a focus on it, and these kind of roles that existed in the D2C and agency space are slowly making its way into the app ecosystem as well, I think. Yeah, I think now is the time to consider this as a separate role, because I think the creative game of most apps was usually subpar. There was always this weird misalignment in how apps treated their creative process and how much they're spending. So oftentimes I would see apps like scaling to like 1 million, 2 million a month on discovery channels, but keeping their production costs very, very low. So I think it like making this a separate role actually puts the priority on this that it needs to have, so that you're not like just doing things randomly and you're basically yeah, you need to have this reliable process and someone that manages it, and making it a separate role just really helps you to put that priority on it. Because as you said, with Scan, it just got a lot harder. Scan really threw a wrench into the whole system. What we're dealing with now is we are not able to track creative performance long term. We see what's going on the platform, but we hardly ever see if a user then actually converts long time, retains. So it's super hard to just outsource your creative testing to the platform and tell Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok to just figure out who the right user is, who's going to be with your app for a long time. Also, there is no creative level tracking with Scan 3 at the moment. So actually, Meta and other platforms are just estimating the performance on an ad level, which might not be as accurate. You never know, and you should be taking care of really structuring tests in a way that allows you to still derive meaningful results. And then there's post-back delays, which means you start a creative test, you don't have data for 2 to 3 days, basically flying blind. Things take a lot longer, and it's also harder to analyze because then that data never is always delayed from your actuals and they don't match on a day-to-day basis. So like, you want to step up your game. You don't just want to throw creatives into a platform hoping for like a hit or miss approach, hoping for something to win but not knowing why, because you're going to waste a lot of budget on it under these circumstances. So hiring a creative strategist, or at least defining that role clearly within your company, makes sure you get to that level of sophistication that then really allows you to still excel under these circumstances. I think it also is super important that you have a very good understanding of the on-platform metrics. So what I see is that still many advertisers are following this hit or miss approach. They test a creative, they just look at what's the result and did it work or not. But I hardly ever, for example, test a video ad that's a winner in the first iteration. So you really want to look into what's the hook rate, what's the hold rate, what's the click-through rate, and then my result rate, so that you have this mini funnel already based on platform metrics. And then you want to look into how can I increase them. Maybe you have a creative that is amazingly hooking people, but then they drop off quickly in the video, which means you have to improve the content afterwards. And usually it will take you 2 to 3 iterations iterating on a video before you are going to make it a big success. So like, really embrace this and make sure that you're not throwing creative ideas away after one try, because you want to consistently learn from them. And a few other advices I have is I try to give as much I want to outsource as much testing to Meta still and their machine learning, or to other platforms. So for example, I barely ever have the time to test different body and headlines because it's just like, I already creating so many different video iterations. I don't just also want to test them on a different dimension, which would be having the same video with 10 different headlines or so. So what I want to do there is just throw that into Meta. They have they automatically will test in the background which headline body combination is the best one. I can report on it a month after or so, see the ones that they favored, and then improve that set over time. And especially for these smaller kind of tests that now aren't as valuable anymore, because as I said, everything is just very clunky these days and it takes a long time. So I'm not going to test a creative with, for example, 3 different backgrounds just to figure out if red is better than blue. And for these kind of things, I think there can be good solutions where a tool helps me to understand these micro variations while I can focus on the big swings as a creative strategist, because that's where I want to apply most of my time. I don't want to figure out these small things that might be 1-2% uplift. I'm going to test totally different audiences, angles, creative formats. And I think that's where tech can really help me in the meantime. The teams that I've worked with or that I worked in, usually creative strategy was handled by performance marketing back in the days. So yeah, mostly, as I said, like people working on discovery channels like Meta Ads, Snapchat were the ones to drive this forward because they needed creative to make their channels work. But this created the issue that everyone was kind of doing their own thing. So sometimes, like in scale teams, if you have like, I don't know, 30, 40 people in performance marketing, you have a team of 5 working on Meta Ads, they do their own creative strategy, and then Google comes up with their own, and Snapchat does as well. So I think what is happening more and more is that this is really looked at in a unified way, so that you don't have these different learnings floating around for different channels. Because in the end, it's just, I mean, learnings will apply anywhere. If you find a new ad angle that works or a new audience that you unlocked because you now talk to them in a certain way about their outcomes and you hook them in a certain way, these learnings should apply not just on Google or Meta. You should be able to port them also into your app store, onto your website, into the product. And I feel like brands are more and more embracing that and really trying to figure out how can we take these learnings, document them, and educate all the teams about it, so that basically the learnings compound over time and actually we get better. One big mistake in terms of team structure that I saw before is that the design team or the video editing team, anyone that then does the execution on creative, is like a service provider to the UA team. And I think that always created a lot of tension, because then you as a UA manager just had to brief the design team and tell them, hey, this is what you should do, while they didn't have a good understanding of the hypothesis or the data behind why you're trying to achieve this. And that just made, I saw so many teams like really failing at this, trying to marry these things. So I think it makes a lot of sense for teams to integrate design and video editing with UA. As I said, maybe having UA managers that are able to create MVP versions of ads, because like your design team will be much more creative if they understood why you're trying to, for example, exchange the content in an ad from the third scene or so, because maybe the UA manager has seen my hold rate is bad, which means people are dropping off after leading into the creative. And these are the kind of things that anyone should understand working on creative, so that they are actually able to get creative themselves and not just execute on this. So I feel like there is this movement of like a more consolidated approach, UA and other creative sources coming together. I think also the industry is just moving a bit in that direction. For example, we can now do custom product pages, which led to ASO being thought much more integrated with UA. And I think the general trend is there, but it's a bit slow. I think it's mainly the size of the app and your goals, like what's the current priority. As you're just starting off and you're probably dabbling in a couple of different ad channels, trying to figure out like where can we actually spend some budget and without it being like super unprofitable, so that we can get users into the app and into our app store to then run experiments here. At that point, probably a creative strategist isn't a good idea, because it's much more about getting some traffic to start scaling your product, start understanding how traffic behaves and improving certain drop-off points. It's not all about optimizing for return on investment yet. And then as you see you're getting closer to like a good payback period, maybe you're able to convert users so that you get your money back within 3 months, 6 months, something that where you say, I feel comfortable with spending a consistent budget. This is where definitely you want to think of who's going to take care of this. And that doesn't necessarily mean hiring someone that is a pure creative strategist, but someone in the team should own this process, because otherwise you tend to default to this hit or miss approach, where ads are created just randomly because someone saw a competitor ad that was interesting or had an idea, and you test it, you don't learn much from it, it's not communicated, and either it worked or it didn't, but it's not going to be predictable and you won't be able to scale. So in the end, the process behind it becomes more important than someone having great ideas. So that's where someone should handle this kind of process to make sure that you are able to learn over time and just get better. So definitely based on vertical and the ad style that you find working, you want to consider, do we already have the skill set in-house? Can that person take it over? Should we hire someone, and what should that look like? That's also why it makes sense to have the first testing done already, get the MVP process up and running, and then you can figure out what would a creative strategist look like for my team based on the first data points and learnings that I see.